This is Background Nippon. There is nothing here that needs your attention. What follows is Japanese history told slowly. For the end of the day, the lanterns are lit. There is a particular kind of quiet that belongs only to mountain roads in early summer. The insects have not yet reached their full chorus. The leaves are still young, pale green, in a way they will not be again until next year. The path under your feet is soft from recent rain, and the only sound is the occasional call of a bird you cannot see. In the spring of 1689, a poet named Matsuo Bashō stepped onto one of these roads and began to walk north. He was 45 years old. He had given away most of his possessions. He had told his students he expected to die on the journey. He carried a travel cloak, a bamboo hat, and a small writing case. What he carried back 5 months later was a book that has never gone out of print. Tonight we walk that road with him. There is no rush. The path is long and the evening is quiet. Matsuo Bashō was born in 1644 in Iga province, in the mountains east of Kyoto. His father was a low-ranking samurai, not a soldier in any meaningful sense, but a man whose social position required him to be counted among the warrior class. Iga was the province associated with the ninja, a detail history enjoys pointing out, though it tells us little about Bashō's actual childhood. He grew up in the town of Ueno, the provincial castle town, and as a young man entered the service of the local lord's son as a kind of companion and attendant. The two were close in age and shared an interest in the literary fashion of the day, haiku. Haiku in the 1650s was not yet what we now understand it to be. It was a popular game more than a serious art. Poems were composed quickly in chains as a social pastime. The skill was in being clever, unexpected, witty. Bashō was good at it, but he was looking for something else. In 1666, the Lord's son died. He was still a young man. Bashō was 22 years old and suddenly without a place in the world. The social position he had been building, attendant to a minor noble, engaged in the fashionable literary life of the province, simply ended. What he did next is not entirely clear from the historical record. There are gaps of several years in his biography, during which he may have studied Zen Buddhism or traveled or both. He eventually made his way to Edo, the great city of more than 1 million people that sprawled across the eastern plain. In Edo, he found a reputation. Students came to him. He taught haiku in the new way he was developing, slower, more attentive, concerned not with cleverness, but with something harder to describe, the quality of a moment, the feeling of one season turning into the next. He lived in a small hut near the Fukagawa district, east of the city, beside a river. A student planted a banana tree outside his door. In Japan, a banana tree is called Bashō. The poet kept the name. The Bashō hut stood just east of the main city, on a quiet stretch of the Sumida River's outer channels. It was a small building, one room essentially, with a narrow veranda looking over the water. The surrounding neighborhood was not fashionable. But from the hut's veranda, on clear evenings, Bashō could see the lights of the city reflected in the river, and beyond that, the open dark of the estuary. He lived there for several years and wrote there, and students came across the water to study with him. He became known. His name carried weight in the literary world of Edo, but he was growing restless. The haiku he wanted to write could not be written in a city. Or rather, they could be written anywhere, but they required a certain state of mind that the city made difficult. He needed to walk. He needed to put himself in motion and stay in motion long enough that something loosened. In the spring of 1689, he began preparing for a journey north. He set out on the 27th day of the 3rd month by the old calendar, late March by ours, when the cherry blossoms were just beginning to fall. He was accompanied by a student named Sora, who would serve as his companion and also keep his own diary of the journey. Between the two records, we have a fairly complete account of where they went and what they saw, though Bashō's account is not really a diary. It is something else, a series of prose passages woven together with haiku in a form he had been developing for years. The prose tells you where he was. The poems tell you what he felt. He had already written, "The spring is going. The birds weep. Fish have tears in their eyes." He wrote it before he left, thinking of the friends he was leaving behind. He did not know when he would return. He wrote with characteristic directness that he felt like a man setting off into the unknown. He was not wrong. He was 45 and traveling in an era when that was not young, and the northern roads were long. The road north from Edo passed through a landscape that was, in 1689, largely unmapped by experience. Most educated people in Edo knew the Tokaido, the great coastal road to Kyoto, well. It was heavily traveled, famous for its 53 stations painted by Hiroshige, but the road north, toward the province of Mutsu and the deep mountains of Tohoku, was different. Less traveled, less celebrated, longer and harder. Bashō and Sora walked. They occasionally rode horses when they could find them to hire. They stayed in guest houses, monasteries, the homes of poets who had heard of Bashō and wished to host him. The journey was physically difficult. Bashō suffered from stomach problems throughout. Sora's diary records illness, rain, muddy roads, guest houses that were too cold or too noisy. Bashō's account mentions almost none of this. He was writing something else, the journey of a consciousness through a landscape, not a record of hardship. Both versions are true. They were just interested in different things. Their first significant stop was Nikko, north of Edo in the mountains of Tochigi. Nikko is the site of the Toshogu Shrine, the mausoleum of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the first Tokugawa shogun, who had been deified after his death in 1616. The shrine is elaborate almost beyond comprehension. 12 buildings with intricate carved panels, lacquer in 5 colors, gold leaf applied to every ornamental surface. It is perhaps the most deliberately overwhelming sacred space in Japan. Bashō stood in front of it and wrote a poem. The poem does not describe the carvings or the gold or the lacquer. It describes something that cannot be looked at, a light so bright it outshines even the most elaborately decorated surface. In his rendering, the shrine becomes a piece of evidence for something beyond human decoration. He was the kind of writer who found the most interesting thing in a place by looking slightly away from what you were supposed to look at. He had weeks of walking still ahead of him. There is a place in Iwate Prefecture called Hiraizumi that most travelers had not heard of in Bashō's day, and that most travelers have still not heard of in ours. In the 12th century, it was one of the most magnificent cities in Japan. The northern Fujiwara clan ruled this region for nearly 100 years, from the mid-1000s to 1189. At their height, they controlled all of Mutsu province, the enormous northern domain, and built in Hiraizumi with an ambition that rivaled anything in Kyoto. The Chusonji temple complex, still standing, holds the Konjikido, a small golden hall, every surface covered in gold leaf and lacquer and mother-of-pearl inlay, built in 1124. It is one of the oldest wooden structures in Japan. In 1189, The warlord Minamoto no Yoritomo came north with an army and destroyed everything he could reach. The clan was exterminated. The city burned. When Bashō arrived, 500 years after the fire, he found grass. He stood in the middle of what had been a great city, with no visible remains except the distant golden hall behind its walls, and wrote the most famous poem in the diary, Summer Grasses, all that remains of the warrior's dreams. It is a poem about the distance between human ambition and what time makes of it. It is also about standing in a specific place in summer looking at grass. Both things at once. From Hiraizumi, Bashō, and Sora turned west into the mountains of Dewa province, the area that is now Yamagata and Akita prefectures. The Dewa Sanzan are 3 sacred mountains that have been pilgrimage destinations for more than 1400 years. Mount Haguro, Mount Gassen, Mount Udono. They are the domain of a particular kind of mountain asceticism, the Yamabushi, wandering monks who combine Buddhist practice with older, pre-Buddhist mountain worship. Bashō climbed all 3. In midsummer, the ascent of Gassen took all day and brought them through snowfields. Bashō was not a young man. He was not in good health. He climbed anyway because the poem at the top, if there was one, was worth whatever was required to reach it. At the summit shrine he received a ritual purification. He wrote afterward that the experience was beyond what he could put into language. He wrote a poem anyway, which is the characteristic thing to do. There is a moment in the journey that most readers stop at. It happened at Yamadera, the mountain temple in Yamagata, a complex of buildings built into the face of a steep cliff. To reach the main hall, you climb 1,015 stone steps, each cut by hand into the rock. The steps are not uniform. They were placed where the cliff allowed them to be placed, so the ascent is uneven and slow and requires attention. Bashō and Sora climbed in the late afternoon of a summer day. At the top, in the stillness of the high temple, Bashō heard cicadas. They were everywhere in the warm months, a constant presence, almost ambient. But in this particular stillness, in this particular place, the sound of the cicadas felt like it was entering the stone itself. He wrote, the stillness, seeping into the rocks, the cry of the cicadas. This is the poem that has been translated more times than any other in the diary, by more people, into more languages. None of the translations are satisfactory. This is not a failure of translation. The poem works in the way Japanese poetry works, through the gap between what is said and what is not said, the way the sound of insects becomes a measure of how quiet everything else is. You can understand this explanation entirely and still not have the poem. You have to be on the steps. After the mountains of Dewa, the road took Bashō and Sora north and west, down toward the Japan seacoast, the side of Honshu that faces the continent, rougher and less celebrated than the Pacific coast. The weather on the Japan seaside is different from eastern Japan. Heavier rain, stronger winds in the winter months that have already begun to gather strength by late summer. The light is grayer and more diffuse. Bashō had been walking for 4 months by this point. His health had been intermittent throughout. Sora had become ill and turned back ahead of him. Bashō was traveling alone for the first time. He wrote about the loneliness without sentimentality. It was simply a condition, like the weather. The haiku from this section of the journey tend to be shorter and sparser than the ones from the mountains. Less is embellished. He was tired, and tiredness had stripped something away. What remained were the essential things: the sound of the sea, the roughness of the road, the particular quality of light on a coast that most people in Edo had never seen. One of the places Bashō had most wanted to see on the entire journey was Kisagata. Kisagata was a lagoon on the northern Akita coast. In the poetry tradition, it was considered one of the most beautiful places in Japan, comparable to Matsushima in the east. Poets had celebrated it for centuries. Bashō had read those poems and wanted to see what they were describing. He arrived in rain. The lagoon was blurred by mist and cloud. The famous view, islands reflected in still water, was invisible. He sat in a guest house and waited for the weather to clear. He waited 3 days. On the third day, the sky opened briefly. What he saw, he wrote, was like a painting by the ancient Chinese master Shishi, most beautiful, seen imperfectly through cloud, when you can sense the form but cannot quite make it out. The rain, he decided, was not a disappointment. It was part of the view. This is one of the things the diary teaches, that the journey you actually take is always different from the journey you planned, and the difference is often where the poem lives. By late summer, Bashō turned south. He had been on the road since late March, nearly 5 months. He had walked through spring and into summer and now into the first edge of autumn. The rice fields in Echigo province were gold. The insects in the evenings were different from the ones that had been there 2 months ago. He was exhausted. The physical record, Sora's diary, the few letters Bashō wrote to students back in Edo, makes this clear. His stomach was bad. His feet were bad. He had none of the money he had set out with. But the poems were good. He knew this. In rare moments in the letters, you can sense the satisfaction of a man who has gotten what he came for, not in spite of the difficulty, but through it. The journey continued south, through provinces he knew less well than the north, Kaga, Ekizen, Omi. He did not reach Edo. The diary ends at the town of Ogaki in Gifu, where friends met him. He had been walking for 156 days and covered more than 2,400 kilometers. He was not finished traveling. He set out again within weeks. Bashō did not write the diary during the journey. He kept notes. Sora kept a separate, more factual account. But the finished version of Oku no Hosamichi, the narrow road to the deep north, was written and rewritten over the following years. Bashō worked on it until at least 1694, the year he died. The manuscript was found among his papers. This matters because the diary is not a record of what happened. It is a shaped work, a literary object that uses the journey as its structure, but is not limited to what the journey contained. Places are compressed, time is rearranged. Some poems were written before the journey and were placed where they felt right. Some scenes are clearly idealized. What this means is that the diary is not a historical document in the way we might use that phrase now. It is a work of art constructed from historical material. And yet it has sent people to Yamadera and Hiraizumi and Matsushima for 300 years, looking for what Bashō saw. They find the places, they climb the same steps. The cicadas are still there. It would be wrong to walk this road without pausing at Matsushima. Matsushima Bay, on the Pacific coast of what is now Miyagi Prefecture, is one of the 3 officially designated Great Views of Japan, the others being Amano Hashidate and Miyajima. The bay contains over 200 small pine-covered islands in water that catches light differently at every hour of the day. Bashō visited in the 3rd month of his journey. He wrote almost nothing about it. He wrote poems leading up to it. He wrote about the approach. He wrote about arriving at the bay in the early morning, when the mist was still on the water. Then he wrote nothing. Scholars have discussed this silence for 3 centuries. The most common explanation is that Matsushima was so well described by previous poets, it had been a poetic subject for hundreds of years before Bashō, that he felt there was nothing to add. The most beautiful thing to write in that situation is nothing. He left a blank where the famous view was. This too is a kind of poem. In 1694, 5 years after the northern journey, Bashō set out south toward Osaka. He was 50 years old. He was not well. He had been unwell for several years, in the way of a man whose body has been used hard and is signaling that its tolerance is not unlimited. He traveled anyway. He had been invited to help mediate a dispute between 2 of his students who had fallen out over poetic matters, a problem that would seem trivial except that Bashō took his students and their relationships very seriously. He arrived in Osaka in the autumn, settled the dispute, and then became very ill. He lay in a guest house bed for 11 days. Students gathered. He wrote a final poem, or possibly several. The record is not entirely clear on which came last. The one most often quoted goes, "On a journey ill, my dreams wander over the withered fields." He died on the 12th day of the 10th month, 1694. He was 50 years old. His body was carried to Zeze near Lake Biwa, and then to the temple at Gichuji where he is buried. The grave is still there. What Bashō did to haiku is difficult to overstate. The form existed before him, and would have continued without him. There were dozens of accomplished poets working in the same period, but something about the way he approached the 3 lines changed what they were understood to be capable of. Before Bashō, haiku was primarily a game of wit. After Bashō, and partly because of him, partly because of how his students taught and spread his methods, it became something closer to meditation, a practice of attending very carefully to one small thing for long enough to notice what is essential about it. This sounds abstract. In practice, it means a frog jumping into a pond is worth a poem. The sound of rain on a hat, the particular weight of an autumn evening, not the great events, the battles, the changes in government, the famous views, but the small ones, the ones that happen every day without being remarkable. This is the tradition he made. It is still being practiced in essentially the form he gave it by thousands of people in Japan and millions more around the world. You can still walk the road Bashō walked. Not all of it. The exact routes between towns have changed. Some paths have become roads, some roads have become motorways, but the significant stops are still there, recognizably themselves. Hiraizumi still has its grass-covered slopes and the Golden Hall behind its walls. Yamadera still has its 1,015 steps. The Japan sea coast is still windswept and grey and unfashionable. People do walk it or portions of it, carrying copies of the diary. They find the places Bashō described and stand in them and read the poems. The poems are 300 years old and were written about places that were already 500 years old when he visited them. What you find when you stand in those places with the book is not what he found. The silence at Yamadera is different now. There are other pilgrims, and the sound of cicadas has to compete with distant roads. Hiraizumi has a car park, but the steps are the same stone. The cicadas are the same species. The grass over the old ruined capital is still just grass. Some things travel well through time. Oku no Hosamichi was published posthumously, the year after Bashō's death, in 1694. It has been in print since. The first full English translation appeared in 1933 by the scholar Nobuyuki Yuasa. Since then it has been translated by Sid Corman, by Donald Keene, by Sam Hamill, by many others. Each translation is different. Each translator finds something different to bring across, and something different that cannot be brought. The poet Gary Snyder, walking mountains in the American Northwest in the 1950s, had a copy with him. The novelist Patti Smith has written about its influence on her own travel essays. The haiku tradition it established spread first to Europe and North America in the late 19th century and is now genuinely worldwide. There are haiku societies on every continent, writing in every major language. 3 lines. A season. Something small observed closely. The principles he worked out on a mountain road in 1689, half sick and exhausted and looking at cicadas, have proven to be very portable. There is a last thing worth saying about the road. Bashō did not call the diary finished. He was still revising it when he died. The manuscript was found in his writing case, the same one he had carried on the journey and published by his students. We do not know what final changes he intended. We do not know whether the last poem was the last one he would have chosen. The book we read is the book his students gave us, which is close to the book he wanted, but not quite it. This seems right somehow. The road he walked was not a road you finish. It was a road that ended because the body gave out, and the poems it left behind are evidence of what was gathered on the way. The evening is cool. Somewhere in the mountains, cicadas are still in the stone. The lanterns are lit. Sleep well.